let's go through the pattern instructions. I've got, so we've gone through the main instructions on the big sheets that you've got, but then you've got the pattern pieces themselves, and they give you a whole list of different sets of reminders more than instructions. So this is number 1, pattern piece 1. Pattern piece 1 is here, and we can see that the shape drawn on the sketch matches the actual pattern piece itself. On the pattern piece, it also shows you the grain line. So that grain line sits there. So if you lose the envelope or the instructions, for instance, you know which website to go to, which pattern number this pattern piece is for. Then it tells us the sizes. Now there's different languages on there, and it's all in inches, so we're still on inches here. Because it's a multi-size pattern, it gives you the small, medium, large and extra large, and in there it tells you the sizes. If you're outside of those measurements, then you would go back to the company and ask them for a different size pattern. Then it tells you what piece this is. This is front for A and B. So this is the front. There it tells you for A and B. So that's the plain one, that's the plain one, but it has the collar. Cut 2 in the fabric. So we've cut 2 pieces of denim, cut 2 of lining, and cut 2 of interfacing. After that, it tells you what the finished garments measurements are going to be. So it tells you again, the chest measurements are going to be these different measurements. Next down is our darts. We talked about darts. So the dart really pinches the fabric. So open it out. And what happens is we end up with a bit of a shape. And that shape makes the figure a bit more slimline, makes the pattern more slimline, giving the illusion of a slimline body. Men aren't built like cubes. They do have a slight waist, not as noticeable as women, but they do have a little bit of a waist. So this makes it, the pattern, a little bit more slimline and a little bit more flattering. Then I showed you here the waistline, where this line, so if I follow that line all the way round, that part of the jacket should sit where the waistline of the wearer is. And if, say, somebody's particularly tall or shorter, then you would alter here. And there's only a small difference. So say you want to make it smaller, you bring that down, up like that. Make sure you match the lines. Try and match the darts as well. Bit more complicated than just folding over like that, because we do need to make sure everything matches up properly. Also then you can snip into that line and add an extra piece to make the piece taller. Okay, so now we know how much fabric, how much lining, how much interfacing we need, how many pieces we need to cut. So that from there on, we can cut the fabric out and have it ready before we go and sew in. We've got all our markings, our notches, our dots for our welt pockets, our dots to match the dart up, make sure it matches up, our centre front line. So that's if you split a person right down the middle from the nose to the belly button, this will sit on that line. So that centre front should sit on that line. Okay, and then we've got the curve and notches to match the shoulder. So that's what is on the pattern piece. It does tell you on here, when you're cutting your pieces out, how to lay everything. So you have 2 pieces, 2 layers of fabric there. And when we fold up the fabric, so that you've got a selvage and the fold there, you can lay your pattern pieces out in that way, so that you can end up with 2 pieces of each of the pattern pieces. Now the fabric's all pressed let's go and place the pattern pieces on there and cut it out. In the pattern, you're advised to fold the fabric the other way, so you've got the good sides together. I'm not going to do that because I need to mark my pattern with some tracing paper because it's got wax all over it. Now, I've bought lots of different brands, and this is the only one that's gooey enough without being too gooey. Lots of wax papers are dry, so you don't transfer the markings easily. But I'll show you a bit more when we get to it. What we need, there are two things you can do here. Because we're making the lining as well in the same pieces, if you want to, you could, and this is something I used to do in the olden days, you could actually place the lining fabric on top and cut all 4 pieces. So you've got your 2 main fabric pieces and your 2 lining pieces all cut. That's an option if you wanted to do it a speedy, quick way. Just make sure the selvages are all neat, like that. Don't worry about matching the cut sides. Always try and match the selvages. If you have steam pressed your fabric or pre-washed it, the fabric should now be set straight. So you could cut all 4 pieces at the same time. Sorry, you could cut your back and your front at the same time. Neither of them sit on the fold, and I've got plenty of space there to put all 4 pieces on there. We could do that. If you're not feeling confident about cutting everything out in one go, that's fine. What you can do is, because this fabric is quite slippery, just giving you a tip here, use your main fabric, which isn't slippery, it might be, but if you do have slippery fabric, grab something that's not slippery. I've got a big sheet of felt, so I lay slippery fabrics and chiffons and silks on top of another layer of fabric so that it doesn't slip and slide. So what I want to do now is make sure that these pieces sit perfectly, and I'm going to make sure that these sides match up, and quite often you can see that the pattern on the weave is the same and follows through, so you can use that to help you. Again, sometimes the fabric shop I've been to, he is fantastic, he cuts fabric really well. That's the Fence shop in Macclesfield. Go and see Phil, tell him Abby sent you. Lovely guy. And they cut the fabric well. I won't give him credit because it was somebody else who cut it this time. Sometimes places like John Lewis, the assistants don't always know how to cut fabric. And when you match up the selvage, you end up with it being true straight like that. So ignore that bit for a moment. But when you match up the selvage, you find you've got a missed part there and a missed part there, which is really frustrating. So when you buy fabric, make sure they cut it well for you. So match up the selvage when you're in the shop and just check it works, that it sits correctly. If it doesn't, ask them to cut another piece before you take it away, because once you take it away, you've got nothing, no comeback really. Nobody gives you returns on cut fabric. Now I've got the selvages all matching up. Let's place this correctly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the selvages together. Put it this way. Right, it's all nice and flat, everything matches up. As long as the selvages match up, I'm happy. Now what we do is we need to grab our ruler or our tape measure. Place your pattern piece stingily. Now I'm not going to use the placement on the pattern. For the lining, they have the pieces sit like that. I've got a wider lining, so I don't need to follow the pattern method on this because I can place both pieces next to each other, can't I? And remember, we copied this in the first part. This will be very helpful to us now. The first one symbol is this main arrow. It's the most important one. This is the one that helps you place your pattern correctly. And it's set from the selvage there. I'm going to move that pin because I know it's going to get in the way in a moment. You'll see. What I want to do is I'm going to measure from that tip of that arrow and the tip of that arrow down to the selvage. And I want them to be the same. So if I go to the white line there, place that on 0, and I'm going to go up to 25. Let's do that again. So that's exactly 25. I'm going to place a pin there and only grab the lining. And then I go along the arrow down there and just shimmy that around and give it all a tug. Make sure it's nice and flat and place that at 25. Hold it steady so it doesn't move. And just grab the lining. Don't grab the denim underneath. If you have, just check. Oh, I have. Just carefully undo and redo. There we go. You can check that again just in case. Moved it. No, perfect. And that will all be 25 all the way down. Okay, so we're going to do the same on here. So from that selvage, we're not doing it from the fold, we're doing it from the selvage. So that's at 25. And we'll make this one at 50. There we go. When you're cutting out slippery fabric, make sure you take your time and use a good sharp pair of scissors. And if you don't have sharp scissors, speak to your local hairdresser and ask them where they get theirs sharpened. They might take yours in for you. I'm going to go straight across there. So I've gone straight across there and I'm going to go back in that way. So I'm going to come across some notches, and we've not come across them yet, but I've got one coming up there and I've got one coming up just there. Now with this notch, I'm going to go straight across. Okay, and then what you'll do then is you'll snip into that notch. Now remember, you're cutting into your seam allowance, so you do not want to make that notch bigger than the seam allowance. Now what will happen is you could compromise the strength of the shoulder by cutting into it. The other way is, let's show you. I'm going to bypass that and just cut a notch into there like that. There we go. I've reflected the shape of the triangle of that notch outwards, so you can see I've not compromised the seam allowance. It sticks out a little bit more and I'll definitely see it, but then so is that one quite noticeable because it's quite big comparatively. It's quite a big notch and you shouldn't miss. Now with the second piece, I'm going to cut this out using a cutting board and a rotary cutter. So I've got to go around and mark my notches. Now, in the pattern instructions, it gives you the option to do the quick snip. So what's the quick snip? That's really just going into the middle of the notch and just doing a quick snip like that. So the lining is all pinned and cut. Again, you've got the option of using scissors or a rotary cutter. I'm going to use scissors here on this one because this is the one with the pleats. There we go. I have my 28mm rotary cutter and I'm just going to follow the lines around. We just need to mark them all now in accordance with the pattern.